October is National Domestic Violence Awareness Month, a time to acknowledge domestic violence survivors and to be a voice for its victims. I am Linda Katz, Chair of CHANA, and I am so pleased to welcome you to our third annual Voices event, as we join together to give a voice to the victims and survivors in our community. For more than 25 years, CHANA has led the charge against domestic violence. Our life-saving work is sustained by all of you as we strive to serve the most vulnerable and help victims become survivors. We are grateful for our partnership with the Associated, for the generosity of our lead sponsor, Lou Hyman, for each of the sponsors you saw listed, and the many donors whose ongoing support is so essential and appreciated. Even a virtual event requires dedication and thoughtful planning. Many thanks to Diane Israel, Chair of tonight's event, Ellen Plant, Development Chair, Lisa Knopf, Development Manager, Dana Letter, Operations Manager, and our leader, Lauren Shavitz, CHANA's Executive Director. Lech Lecha, the Torah portion for this coming Shabbat, begins with God's command to Abraham. Vayomer Adonai el Avram, Lech Lecha me'artzecha. The Lord said to Abraham, go forth from your native land, from your father's house, to the land that I will show you. God told Abraham to leave the only life and home that he had ever known to travel to an undisclosed land. I imagine Abraham was asked why he would leave his native land, his father's home, and all that was familiar. Understanding how difficult this would be, Abraham wisely took his support system with him, his family, his belongings, and his enduring faith. Abraham was walking toward something, to the land that I will show you, God said, and the many possibilities of the future. It is so very different to walk away from, to leave home, sometimes with nothing, not even an ID, and confront the unknown. This is the plight of victims of domestic violence who are often asked, why didn't you leave? Why don't you leave? While it may appear that these victims have an obvious choice to stay or leave, the path is precarious, the barriers formidable. Besides physical abuse, victims often endure verbal, emotional, and financial abuse, isolation, threats to their children or other family members. The likelihood of violence rises significantly during and after separation. For compelling reasons, the choice to leave is agonizing and complicated. Admitting abuse takes courage. Leaving an unhealthy relationship takes tremendous courage, planning, and support. Since the onset of COVID-19, there has been an unprecedented rise in incidences of domestic violence globally and right here in Baltimore. The stories are heartbreaking, frightening, and touch every part of our community. We are fortunate that CHANA is here to confront the catastrophic effects of the pandemic and the residual impact that shows no sign of abating. CHANA provides a range of services to meet the needs of each client: child victims, adult survivors, sexual abuse victims, male victims, and those who suffer from elder abuse. Trained to respond during times of crisis, CHANA's expert staff work tirelessly to flatten the curve of violence, to help clients and their families overcome trauma and begin to heal their wounded souls. The lesson of Lech Lecha offers hope as we travel through the ups and downs of life. The goal is forward movement. God did not inform Abraham of his final destination. He instructed Abraham to continue traveling until he received an indication from above that he had reached the promised land and the end of his journey. Because of your generosity and commitment, CHANA is here to ensure that victims and survivors of domestic violence in our community reach their promised land, to ensure that individuals who seek our help can ultimately continue their life's journey free of trauma and rebuild their lives with self-determination and in safety. Tonight, we will hear about Bill Mitchell's journey. Diane Israel, past chair of CHANA, chair of tonight's event, and my very dear friend will introduce our inspiring program.
Good evening. CHANA is deeply honored today to have Bill Mitchell as our speaker for our third annual Voices event. The program promises to be compelling and inspiring as we listen to his family's tragic journey in the world of dating violence. It is our hope that after hearing Bill's message, you will use your voices to share this vital story. On June 3rd, 2005, Bill and Michelle Mitchell's daughter, Kristen, was murdered by her ex-boyfriend in her apartment in Conshohocken, Pennsylvania. 20 days prior, the Mitchell family had attended Kristen's graduation from St. Joe's University. It was the last time they saw her alive. Since then, Bill has passionately spoken out on the need for education and about the warning signs and the dangerous consequences of dating violence. He has delivered over 100 speeches at high schools, colleges, and private companies. He has been interviewed for TV, radio, podcasts, and webinars. In 2020, Bill published When Dating Hurts on Amazon. It is the memoir about Kristen's murder and his family's journey towards healing through helping others. This book contains life-saving information on how to detect an unhealthy relationship and how to be safe. Bill launched his new podcast, also entitled When Dating Hurts, in 2021. With this series, he interviews domestic violence leaders, law enforcement professionals, parents of murdered children, and survivors, both female and male. Please welcome our guest, Bill Mitchell.
Thank you very much, Diane. I really appreciate that introduction, and I want to thank CHANA for asking me to come and speak tonight. This is quite an opportunity. I call this talk When Dating Hurts. It's the name of the book that I published, and it's also the name of the podcast that I just launched at the beginning of this year. But now let's go back in time to the college graduation that Diane spoke about, May 14th, 2005. And you can see in these pictures my daughter from those days. At St. Joseph's University in Philadelphia. You see her with her mother. Bottom left, you see her with her best friend Samantha. But, you know, we drove up from Ellicott City, Maryland to Philly that day for that, and it was everything it could be. It was wonderful. Kristen never looked more radiant, more proud, like she was ready to go. She never looked happier, excited. She was just ready, just absolutely ready. These pictures were also, of course, taken that day. You see my son David. You see Kristen, you see Michelle, my wife, me, and on the right, Kristen and David. Those pictures are pretty precious. The ones on the left are of us together. It's the last time the four of us ever had our pictures taken together. Really capturing, you know, the last of us four living at the same time. One of the great ironies is that the guy that took the picture, who I called Nick in the book, his name isn't Nick, but Nick took that picture you see on the left. Great irony to that. The guy that ruined it the guy that reduced us to 3 living people. When I first met him and shook his hand there that day outside, my initial reaction was, wow, I'd never want to tangle with this guy. Not a good feeling. I didn't act on that. I just felt like I had some fear of this guy that I couldn't really understand. But then it was really, the focus was on Kristen, not on Nick, and talking to Kristen's friends and meeting some of her college buddies and things like that. But that was an opportunity that if I would have acted on that, I would have learned maybe more about him and maybe more about that relationship. All we knew at that time was that she had said to her mother at one point, it's not the perfect relationship. And her mother and I took that as this probably won't last very long. And, she'll move on to somebody else. The pictures on here were taken between the graduation day, May 14th, 2005, and June 2nd, 2005. And you see her at different times. You see her in the upper middle in her new apartment she had moved into just weeks before this. And she was making potato and cheese soup. She had pictures taken. It turns out he actually took that picture, but she had pictures of the ingredients and the soup coming together. That picture on the right is, another one of Kristen, of course, just looking wonderful, as she always did. She never took a bad picture. Bottom right was in a car with a friend who took that picture. The other one's in the middle to her friends Samantha and Felicity on graduation day. And the reason for the General Mills logo is she had a job already lined up with them. It's a job everybody at St. Joseph's in food service wanted, the sales marketing job, the position. The pictures you see along the bottom, the 8 pictures in a row, were actually selfies that she took. And she had a friend with her that they both were in the picture, but I came and I photoshopped them all together there. But that string of pictures, those 8 pictures lined up, that string of pictures was taken. The police, the detectives figure that series of pictures were taken about 3 or 4 hours before she was murdered. On June 2nd, though, she spent that day with 2 of her friends from St. Joseph's University, a couple of people that she had gone through a lot of business classes with and did presentations with, and she was just very close to them. They even graduated one after another, getting their diplomas in line that day. But she made it clear she was not seeing her boyfriend that day. He didn't like that at all. So on that same June 3rd, she was seeing a couple of her friends. In the meantime, Nick, as we're calling him, was pretty angry about it because he was being shut out that day. And abusive people won't take that, not lightly. He was jealous of Kristen spending the day with her friends, interrupting her with texts and phone calls all day long. At one point, coming up with a way for them to stop everything they were doing so she could get together with him for a bit. And then he got back out of there, but she had made it clear to her friends that she'd had it with him. And at one point actually took back a key that he had to the apartment, and that's why we always refer to him as ex-boyfriend. But he was also lying about his whereabouts that day. He said he was with his brother at different times during the day. He wasn't. He was actually seeing a girlfriend that he had about 6 months before Kristen. So he lied about that, which is another kind of classic warning sign. But he just kept getting angry and angry all day, just kind of coiling himself up for what was going to happen. Now, what I'd like to do is kind of pause the story and just talk about some of the red flags, or some people call them warning signs, of an unhealthy relationship. And every one of them fit under one big umbrella called power and control. And here are some examples. And these are really important. And if you have a pen and paper, or if you don't, get them, because you might want to write a few of these down. It could really help you save someone's life, maybe your own. Controlling or dominant behavior is one of the things that comes to mind immediately. Somebody who just wants to control, dominate, and tell you what to do, and force your life to match up with his or hers, depending on who the abuser is. Extreme jealousy or possessiveness. That was one thing our guy Nick had to a fairly well. Very jealous guy. If Kristen was with anybody but him, he was not a happy guy, and he made it clear. We found all of this out later. Constant put-downs. Now, some of these warning signs are about Kristen and this guy, and some of these I've learned over the course of the last 16 years, since 2005, from people who do this for a living, counselors, law enforcement people, other people. So this is kind of a collection, though, of the classics, but constant put-downs. That's to put someone else in their place, to make sure that they know that you are subservient to them. Isolating you from family and friends. This guy was a master of this. He even, isolated her from her friends. Now, one way to do this is just be so obnoxious around the abused person's friends that they don't want any part of him, don't want to see him anymore. Well, that's what he wants. So he just wants you to himself. That's what he's after. And even doing things like that, trying to keep her, away from anything that she enjoyed doing. But we'll get to some of those. Someone who checks your cell phone, emails, texts without your permission. The type of person you leave the room and you might walk back in and you see they've got your phone and they're like, oh, who's this person? What's this all about? But somebody has this insidious, manipulative style of getting into everything about you and wanting to know more and more. Somebody checking up on you constantly via calls and texts. That's one of the things that I learned that this guy did all the time. He was always doing that kind of thing. What are you doing now? How much longer are you going to be with them? I thought you were going to be with me today. Making you feel no one else could ever want you. Didn't necessarily happen in Kristen's case, but the type of person that makes it seem like or makes it feel like, thank God I'm here, with you, because I'm not so sure anybody else would give you the time of day. I mean, you're not that big a prize. Something like that. Making you feel you can't do anything right. There's a term for it, which I won't go into in our short space of time here tonight, called gaslighting. You might want to look it up if this subject means a lot to you. But learn about gaslighting. But it's somebody who wants to make you feel you can't do anything right, somebody who wants to keep you off balance, somebody who will even plant things or do things in the house or around you to make it look like you failed on something, just so it brings down your self-esteem, and therefore they have more and more power. Because if the abuser's the power person, then the other person has to then be the not powerful person, the weak person, preventing you from doing what you want to do. Let's say you want to play tennis, that person will find some way to goof it up for you. Maybe tell you it's a waste of money, it's a waste of time. You'd be better off just spending time with me. You want to go horse riding? That's expensive. That's ridiculous. You could get hurt. Little by little, snipping, let's say, use the analogy of you're a beautiful tree. By the time this person gets finished, there are no branches left. Nothing. It all gets snipped off. It doesn't happen on the first date. It doesn't happen in the second or third date, but it happens over the course of time. Someone who's always telling you what to do, telling you how to do your hair, telling you, I don't like your hair that way, I like it this way. Somebody telling you you're wearing too much makeup, telling you what to wear, how to act, what kind of car you should drive. And then somebody who lies practically about everything. So those is kind of the lineup of those. And again, these don't happen right in the very beginning, but they do tend to happen over the course of time. Over the last 15 or 16 years, I've met hundreds of people, of course, from speeches I've given, who'll come up to me afterwards or before speeches, or people I've talked with at domestic violence agencies, and I've learned a heck of a lot. And that's what I'm sharing with you tonight, and that's what I share in the book that's in the right-hand corner there. But in these conversations, I've learned that there's a pattern to it all. And I was actually kind of surprised. I thought it was just kind of random, but it's really not. There's a true template to it that every abuser follows. It goes something like this. Storybook romance. Starts out, it's great. Takes you to places maybe you've never been to before. Has a really nice car. One of the most charming people you've ever met in your life. These people do this because they're practiced. They figured out what works. They know what doesn't work. Somebody that buys you stuff. Somebody who just treats you like you've never been treated. Then isolation. Again, it doesn't happen in the very beginning, but over the course of time, you will become more and more isolated from those things that used to make you, you. Trying to isolate you from your family members. We don't want to go in there. let's go here. I've met your parents. I don't need to see them. Don't really like them that much. Put you in a position where you have to keep making choices. You have to choose between this person who you don't realize maybe is abusing you and the rest of your life that you used to have. But isolation, just use your imagination of all those things that used to make you you. This person would try to do their best to take those things away and just make it all about themselves. Threats of violence. Threats of violence, again, if these type of things, if they happened on the first and second date, you'd say, you know what, I'm kind of done. I'm getting out early. That's it. But threats of violence would be like somebody who says, you know, I got to be honest with you. When you say things like that to me, it sounds like my mother when she used to get on my case. And I'll tell you, I hear that. I just want to slap you. I just do. And I don't want to do that. But now that sends a message to you that you better watch what you're doing. You want to get back to that storybook romance. You want to get back to that happy guy. You want to get back to the happy you. You don't want to get hit. You don't want somebody yelling at you. You don't want somebody slamming on the brakes, in the car. You don't want somebody pulling a bunch of near misses around you with these threats. Not in all cases, but in many cases, then comes the actual violence, where you really do, unfortunately, get slapped, you get hit, you get punched, you get shoved, you might get strangled, or some people call it choking, but technically it's strangulation. Choking's when you choke on food. People don't choke you, they strangulate you. But those times when you actually really do feel it, you really do get hurt, it really does leave a mark. So how do they get out of that? Well, they're good at it. Remember, the people that do this are practiced. They've learned it by seeing other people do things like this. So what they do is they come up with a convincing apology that you buy, or at least you buy most of it. Somebody that says, look, I had a really bad week this week. I should never have taken this out on you. My boss is a jerk. Or somebody saying, I killed myself on that test and I still didn't do well and I just lost it. I've never lost it before. I've never lost it with anybody else. It'll never happen again. Can't we just get over this? You'll see it'll be okay. It'll be better. And then last, repeat storybook romance. Look, I'm really sorry about what happened. Why don't we go get a nice meal tonight? Or maybe the next day, maybe your iPhone 8's replaced with the iPhone 13. Different things depending at what level. If you're dating, something nice will probably come along and you think, if we could just get back to the way it was when I met this person, that'd be great. I'm all for that. And maybe you feel like we can get back there. I got to find a way to get over that. Now, we talk a lot about domestic violence, but now and then it's good to actually hear somebody's technical explanation as to what that is. And this is one of the best ones I've seen recently. Domestic violence is the willful intimidation, physical assault, sexual assault, battery, and or other abusive behavior as part of a systematic pattern of power and control perpetrated by one intimate partner against another. Now, I like that. It's long and involved, but I like it because domestic violence doesn't happen by accident, especially if it's ongoing. It doesn't happen by accident. There's none of this, I didn't know what I was doing. You did know what you were doing. You really did. Maybe it went farther than you intended it to, but it is no accident at all. And in our case, in our family's case, in Kristen's case, Kristen didn't know. She didn't know any of this. And neither did her friends, and honestly, neither did her parents or her teachers. So let me go back to the story if I could. We finished off at June 2nd, and I want to go to June 3rd. I got a call on the rainy evening of June 3rd, 2005 by a detective. And the detective said, I need to meet with you and I need to tell you something. And it has to be in person. And I said, well, okay. Now I'm thinking, I don't get calls from detectives. I don't know who this person is. This person was a woman. She was a detective. And she seemed pretty determined to meet with me. And so what I did is I picked a Giant store near where we live in Ellicott City, because I figured if this is not who she says she is, I want people to be around, because I'm about to get jumped or God knows what's going to happen. Turns out she was a detective, needed to meet with me. And it looked just like this. And that's actually, that Gatorade container there, that's exactly where I was standing when I got the word. And the word was, after they kept saying, well, don't you want to sit in your car with us, or don't you want to sit in their car or a restaurant that was next door or something like that, I said, no, I just want to hear whatever you have to tell me. I thought something happened on our street that day. And they said, Mr. Mitchell, I hate to inform you, your daughter was murdered today by her boyfriend. She was stabbed to death. Now, in my mind, I didn't need much more explanation than that. I'd like to know why, but I realized my life is completely different. That was that. There was nothing I could do about that except get the information. And we've gotten all the information you could ever imagine about what happened, but that's a parent's greatest nightmare right there. And I'm still living it. And my wife and my son and I, our family, my mother, they're all still living it. We think about her every day. It hurts absolutely every day. It hurts right now. But Kristen didn't know what to look for, didn't know about the warning signs. Her friends didn't. She said something to a teacher days before her graduation, and she said, he said, what else is going on? She says, well, I'm dating this guy, but, it's not that great. And he said, well, what do you mean? She goes, nah, it's just kind of like a problem thing. This guy's difficult, and I can handle it. And he didn't do any more than that. And I tell you, if I were that man, I probably wouldn't do any more than that either. It's like, okay, sounds like she's got it under control. She really didn't, because she didn't know what she was dealing with. And of course, their parents didn't know either. We didn't have a lot of hints, but except, it's not the perfect relationship, or the fact that I thought I would never want to tangle with this guy. But the fact of the matter is, now you do know what to do, or what to look for. And now I'll tell you what to do in a couple minutes. This is the only fact I usually dispense in any of these talks, and that is 1 in 3 women will suffer serious physical violence in an intimate partner relationship, and that it typically happens between the ages of 16 and 24. But it honestly could happen in any age. I've met people who were 12 years old, first year high school, who've come up to me after speeches and said, yeah, I had a boyfriend just like the one you were talking about today. All the same things. I mean, you rattled off all these classic warning signs. I experienced every one you put on the screen, Mr. Mitchell, just like that. I've talked with other people who are in their 50s and 60s. It's just the same type of story. Now, that's a 1 in 3 fact. Another one is that 1 in 4 men, and 1 in 3 is pretty staggering. And another staggering fact, I'll give you one more, is 1 in 4 men actually experience the very same thing. They're on the receiving end of it. The one thing I feel like I have to interject so it doesn't become so much of a male bashing type of thing is only about 3 or 4% of men actually do this. Okay, so it's not 1 in 3 men are on the giving end of physical violence in these relationships. It's actually very small. But the fact of the matter is that 3 or 4% is going around and doing it to a lot of people over the course of their lifetimes. So the question has to be, okay, I've heard everything that you've had to say. I've got most of it. What do I do? I mean, I've heard all this information. What if my daughter's talking to me? What if someone at work's talking to me and they said, I got to be honest, I got this guy I've been dating and some of these things are going on. And you think, oh my God, it sounds like that talk that guy gave that night on Zoom. So what do? Well, I'll tell you what you do right now. But number one, you do something. You do something. You don't wish this away. You don't wish they had talked to somebody else. You have to help them deal with it. You have to do absolutely something. You have to listen to that person. It's important to listen, but you also have to believe that person. You're hearing things possibly that you've never heard before. maybe never heard from that person before, maybe never heard in your life. But you have to believe that person. For all you know, this is the first time that person has talked with anybody about this thing that is weighing down on them very heavily. And you have to take this as your responsibility to do something, and I'll tell you some of the things you can do. Now, if you have no idea what to do, again, grab a pen and a piece of paper and just write down, start with this number, 800-799-SAFE, Domestic Violence Hotline. Or call House of Ruth or some other local domestic violence agency. And I'll have one more number here in a couple of minutes. But do something. You're not expected to listen to a 25-minute talk tonight and listen to the other people who are doing this tonight and get everything, and it's all, you got it cold and you know exactly what to do. But at least this is a place to get started. That's a toll-free number. It doesn't cost anything to call, and they don't charge you anything to do it. And if you call it and say, my daughter's in this horrible relationship, they're not sending in a SWAT team. They will do what they're asked to do. But mainly they want to dispense information. One great piece of advice that I've heard is that if somebody's in a relationship like this, you say, look, I want to call this number. I would love for you to sit there and call it with me. And if you don't want to stay on it, if your friend, the abused person, doesn't want to stay on the call, you can say, look, we can hang up at any time. We're not going to hurt anybody's feelings. But at least do something, get started. The other side of the coin is what not to do. Because there are a lot of things that you think you should probably do, kind of jump into action, and you'll be tempted to do these things. But the bottom line is, don't. And the other thing is, they don't work. They typically don't work, and they could be very dangerous to you and very dangerous to the other person. Now, here are some things that you probably would, off the top of your head, said, I'd probably do that. I know I would. One of them is ask too many questions. You kind of want to do that. Or if that person's giving you this horrible news, you want to keep interrupting. Oh my God. This is horrible. This is the worst thing I've ever heard. Or you try to solve their problem. You don't know how to solve their problem. Something like this is so insidious and runs so deep, trust me, you don't know. And at the beginning for me, I didn't either. But asking too much questions is not the way to go. Instead of asking too many questions, you want to listen to that person, as I said before. You want to believe that person. You want to ask, if you ask questions, leading questions, like a psychologist. How long has this been going on? Then listen. How does it make you feel? And then listen. Do your other friends know about this? Then listen. You don't want to be hearing your voice. You want them to. And the reason for that is they've got to talk themselves out of this relationship. Until they do that, they will stay in that relationship. And honestly, the more you kick them out of that relationship, at least in your mind, push them out, the more they feel that at times they have to defend the other person. So you're actually making it worse. You're making them go to that person, and they could go to that person and say, my mother thinks I had to break up with you. Not a good plan. You'll be isolated out of that world even more. You're going to feel like you want to get angry that this is happening. You can't. Become aggressive. You can't. Search out the abuser. I could picture me wanting to grab my car keys and make a run for it at somebody if they were making my daughter miserable. I can picture it right this second, even now, under these circumstances. Doesn't work. And what happens is something violent could go down. You could get killed, they could get killed, or someone else could get killed. So you don't want to do that. You have to take it slow. It takes a long time for a relationship like this to get this bad. It takes a while to get out of it, too. And then the other thing, which is quite natural, is to feel frustrated if things don't clear up quickly. And they probably won't. There's no magic wand to this thing. This took a lot of time to get going. It takes a while for it to come to a screeching halt. And sometimes it takes days, months, and sometimes years for these things to go away. I know of a lot of people who've been through this, and it's a tough road, and you have to sign up for the whole thing. One other thing too is at times you can't help but go to your own feelings, okay? You forget that it's about the feelings of the survivor rather than your own thoughts and your own feelings, okay? So you have to, You have to dial it back. It's not easy. You're hearing news you never wanted to hear. Another number that you can call, is the 410-234-0030 number for HANA. And they're the people putting this on tonight, but they want to help you too. There's a live chat. If you don't want to sit there and talk, but you want to kind of type it in and go with it, great. Go to hanabaltimore.org, call the number 410-234-0030, and I suggest you call that one or some of the other ones we've talked about tonight. As I said earlier, you want to do something. Okay, and that's the other one I talked about. Domestic violence, a widespread epidemic of pain and suffering that leads to a lifetime of broken dreams. My family and I are the poster family for a lifetime of broken dreams. The night that I got the word from the police, when I was in my car driving away, I thought about all the different things that will never happen. No more birthdays, no more holidays, get-togethers, so many things. No marriage to some great guy or something, no grandchildren from that side, none of that stuff. I was driving my car, going to my house, getting ready to see my son and my wife to tell him what happened. I'm going to switch subjects here, but I was asked, it was suggested to me, to maybe talk about going through how faith played a part in our journey ever since June 3rd, 2005. And I can't go into great depth, but I'll tell you, if you see the book, and you'll see again soon, the front of the book has a locket. That actually shows you the inside of the locket. But the story behind the locket, the story behind the locket is remarkable, and I've told it many times. I can't tell it here, and it's not a ploy to get you to buy the book, but it takes too long. It's a very involved story, but it has an incredible outcome that some people will come out and say, that's just a miracle that happened. We're not these superstitious, strange people who, they see a rainbow on the left. That actually kind of showed up in the middle of a rainstorm. We were visiting Kristen's grave, and I looked up and I see this. The sun came out long enough to take a couple pictures. There's also a story about a fan in our bedroom. We were at the graveyard and on a different day, and we're actually burying Kristen's cat. Her favorite cat died 2 months after she died. And this fan, some lights on this fan came back to life that night. And when the lights in the room went down, the fan, the small LED lights would come up, and you put the lights on the room, they go away. Anyhow, but it had no solar type of activation on there. What it comes down to is the lights were coming on and off, and it's impossible. It couldn't. We had an electrician check it out. He says, I don't know why they're working. He said maybe ghosts or something. But there are a number of things. Now, we're not these superstitious people that keep looking for coincidences all the time and saying, oh my God, that's this thing. But our faith has kind of gotten us through so much of this. And I believe that our faith in God has really buoyed us up, and it's helped us to believe that there's more to this life than meets the eye, the ear, and things that you can touch. There's more here, and I believe that our faith in God got us through all these type of things, praying quite a lot, feeling at times like Kristen, feeling a sense of her around us, even today for me. We've had a number of things like that happen, and we feel like she's keeping an eye on us and watching over us. And if anything, giving us the courage to get up and give talks like this and put the book together and do a podcast and various things like that. So I feel like we're kind of on a mission, and we're really fueled by our passion for it. I was asked just to talk a little bit about our family, and here's some shots. You might look at this tonight and say, oh my God, this poor guy and his family, Jesus, such a sad story. But, or I'm so glad this never happened to my family, you could be thinking. But the fact of the matter is it could, because we're really no different from any other family. This just happened to land on us at this time. But, I've met a lot of people over the years, and they've had the same reaction. We did our best to raise our kids a certain way, and our life was just plain redirected. I like this quote which is everyone deserves a healthy relationship, safe from violence and fear. Protect yourself and your loved ones from abuse by learning the warning signs. So if you want to know how to fend this off, how to detect it, how to make it go away, learn the warning signs, because they will tell you that there is trouble brewing, and you can then call the numbers and do some of the things we talked about. Just want to leave you with saying, we obviously can't undo what happened to Kristen, but honestly, at this point in this talk, it's no longer really about Kristen or me or my family. It's about your family. It's about people you know. It's about your friends. It's about some niece of yours, maybe, some coworker. This can be prevented if you know what to look for and then take action. A couple last slides here very quickly. The one on the right is actually a picture that I found, but it matches a dream I had about her one night, talking with her at night on a fairground somewhere and hugging her, and it was just so real. And then I found this picture a couple of days later, because in the dream she walked away, and there she is. And then this is a note that I found in her college papers, and we do miss her. I just want to thank you very much, and I think I'm going to now speak with Lauren, because there's some questions that have been coming in, and we want to handle that. So thank you very much for listening. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Bill. We know that you have turned your family's personal tragedy into a platform to become a staunch advocate in the prevention and education of dating violence. We are grateful to have you here with us this evening. For those of you who I do not know, my name is Lauren Shavitz, and I am the Executive Director of CHANA. Listening to Bill share his story, while terribly painful and almost impossible to bear, it reminds us why we must gather together to have these conversations and learn this vital information. At this point in the evening, we will be having a brief question-answer session with Bill and our audience. Please feel free to write any questions that you may have for Bill in the chat feature, and we will do our best to get to as many of them as possible. So with that, I see that we have quite a number of questions coming in, Bill.
That's good. Thank you.
So the first one that I see here is there anyone that you think could have talked to Kristen that would have made a difference?
Oh, yeah. We've thought about that quite a lot over the years. I don't think, well, for instance, like her best friend Samantha spoke with her days before this happened and really put her on notice that I think you need to get some space from this guy. This is not healthy. This is not good. And they just wound up in an argument. And Samantha, to this day, can't remember who hung up on who, but that's kind of what happened there. They kind of hung up on each other. It kind of made Kristen angry, and probably because it was true that she needed to really think this thing through and bail out of this. And she tried to do it, the evening she was killed. In terms of somebody, though, I think it's somebody that had to really, for someone to sway Kristen, I think they really had to know a lot more about domestic violence, a lot of things I talked about tonight, to really convince her about how bad this is. Not just how uncomfortable dating this guy was, but I mean, that this could go to a really, really, really desperately bad place. So I think someone had to have the background knowledge to convince her, to tell you the truth.
Thank you. Another question is, Kristen was clearly such a kind soul. Is there anything about her that you believe made her vulnerable?
I like the kind soul comment, because she was a very generous person. She was very sweet. She was very nice. But it's interesting. I spoke before a class at her high school last year, a whole girls' school in Catonsville. And the teacher, not because of anything I said, but the teacher said that the nice girls seem to wind up in these relationships more than girls who aren't quite as nice. The girls who are more forceful and push back on people when they don't like behavior like this. So Kristen was a very kind soul. And I tend to think it happens to kind souls because they're compassionate people, they're patient, they look for the good, they want to see it work out. They're pulling for that other person, even though what's happening is kind of unhealthy and not necessarily good. And what happens is they wind up enabling the behavior that even they don't want. They make it easier for that person to be as bad as that person could actually be because they keep giving them a little more slack as time goes on. So I think that was on the list of things that were her undoing, mostly that she just didn't know how to read the warning signs. But
Thank you.
yes.
There's a question here that I think we probably all want to know. How are you and your family coping now?
Yeah, that's, well, it's tough to give a talk like tonight, so right now I'm a little out of my happy place. But overall, we're not broken people. We made a conscious decision pretty early on that this was something we needed to live with. Not ignore, but live with. Some people just kind of try to shut it all off. We didn't. We've kind of embraced what happened. We don't like it, but we embraced it. And if anything, it's given us energy to push back the other way. To take it, learn about it, talk about it, and do things like that. So as I said, we're not at all broken people. We're not done. And I say that because I've met people who actually did kind of hand it in. Who just stopped celebrating holidays the way they used to and all but turned all the pictures in their house the other way, and things like that. They didn't want the pain of it. And, I have as much respect for those people as anyone else. But everybody handles it differently, and we've faced it somehow. I guess I think it's a matter of faith, and maybe it's just the type of people we are, but I feel like we faced it.
Thank you. And this is a challenging one. The news is flooded with information about Gabby Petito's death.
Sure is.
Can you share the impact that this has on your family and anything that you think is important for us to think about as we watch this tragedy unfold?
Yes, that's a good topical question right now. It's on the news every evening, probably during the day too, but we see it every evening. A few thoughts come to mind. One of them is that this isn't the first one of these in the last 16 years that's come along, where we've heard something, and this one's still unfolding, so, we don't know for sure. We know the guy, this Brian guy, is a person of interest. I think with the news in the last couple of days, I would call him a murder suspect personally, but I'm not in law enforcement, but it seems like kind of a no-brainer, But, I think that we see these, they hurt, but what gets me is I feel so bad for that family, even though I know what they're going through, but it still hits me in kind of an objective emotional way. I feel horrible. When she was missing, I thought she'd turn up not living. And I don't know a lot about the case, but I would kind of make the leap that he probably did it. And I think that, I feel bad, and if nothing else, because these things seem to keep happening. You hear the national ones, but there are a lot of that never go national.
Certainly.
I empathize.
Thank you. Someone in our audience wants to know how your experience with the criminal justice system was.
Well, I would say it was as good as it could possibly be. It's something, of course, nobody ever wants to go through. We dealt with people who were in the Philadelphia area, in Montgomery County, and I felt like I thought they were great considering what we were going through, meaning that they were always very responsive. They were always telling us things as soon as they knew things. They were just letting us in on how they approach things. The first thing they did is the prosecutor and the lead detective came to our house, drove down and sat in our house for several hours, and even walked around the house trying to get the feel of us and her, of Kristen. So I felt like they took a very professional, but also kind of a personal interest. Maybe because they could identify with us, and maybe they could look at our daughter and say, wow, that could have been my daughter. I think they felt some of that too. But I thought they were very professional and very efficient and moved this thing along as best they could. From the time that then this guy killed my daughter to the time that he pled guilty in a courtroom and went to prison was about 10 months. So, and I don't mean that like a long time. That's actually moving along.
Right, sure.
That's kind of a sort of fast one. But it didn't go into a courtroom, and we didn't have to go through that part of it, which would have been really, really hard, really hard.
Well, that kind of leads us to our next question is Nick up for parole anytime soon?
Well, Nick has already been up for parole. So he pled guilty to third-degree murder in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and that comes with 15 to 30 years. So if you do the math, 2005 plus 15 is 2020. So he was up last year for that. And once the parole board themselves did any hearings they did or got any letters of objection that can be sent in by anybody, absolutely anybody, when they looked at all of that, supposedly if they take a look at what he's been up to in prison, like they actually have classes for people who, abuse people or kill people or have anger management issues or whatever it is. I don't know. They cannot tell us what exact classes he took and how he did, but they put him through those classes. One way or another, he didn't make it that year. So he didn't come out in 2020. He could have. He didn't come out this year, 2021. And so we go through this annually. We'll do this every year until he hits year 30, if he hits year 30. And he didn't pass this time, and I'll stick my neck out and say, I hope he never gets out. Sure. The one thing I can tell you about Nick is that under the right or wrong circumstances, he kills people. Sure. And he won't be killing any of us. He'll be killing somebody else, and I am terrified of what this guy's capable of. I really am. He's not a good guy.
Someone here must have read your book, and they talked about how in your book you mention how someone, your coworker, made a terribly insensitive remark, and they want to know how you move on from things like that.
Yeah, well, I didn't say I did move on. I didn't say I did. No, I still feel I have more important things to think about, but when I think about it, it still makes me kind of angry. The center of that comment was that Kristen was killed in June of 2005, and you can't help but wear that on you around the office at times, or people ask you, or something new's happening in the case. So it would come out, and one of the managers there at some point, it was actually a couple days before Christmas that year, so of course it's December, and he said, you could really do yourself and everybody here a favor if you would leave 2005 in 2005 when we move into 2006. That was the comment. And I won't go into it here, but I made it clear that if this had happened in his family, I bet he'd have a difficult time just kind of, putting it in a little compartment and kind of zipping it shut. So I raised a very strong objection. And if for no other reason, we were still at that time facing a potential case in a courtroom to have to go through and live through all of this. So it wasn't like it was over just because he was kind of getting tired of hearing about it. So.
Your talk was so informative. In your opinion, at what age should we begin having these conversations with our children?
At what age? It's an interesting thing you should say that, because I talked with a domestic violence counselor just a couple weeks ago, and she speaks before middle school, high school, and college. And I said to her in a podcast interview, I said, but you can't go and talk to some 6th, 7th, or 8th grader, can you, about dating violence? And she said, no, we don't do that. What they talk about is obviously very smart and very well thought through. They talk about what's a healthy relationship and what's an unhealthy relationship. The reason why that's so wise is because they liken it to any relationship. Like dating is a relationship. You play fairly or you don't. You let that other person have what they want. You want what they want. You want them to be happy. You don't play power games on your friends. Now you could, but you kind of shouldn't. So power and control, the things I talked about, isolating your friends from their other friends, which you could do. You could feel jealous because they're doing that and your friend is kind of with them and they're not with you. You could go there. So, they kind of want to get that in your mind so that when you get a little bit older and maybe you are dating, that you start to apply the same rules of fairness and equality and really all of that, how to really in a very healthy way, get along with another person, because it's going to apply later on. In fact, the rest of your life it's going to apply if done well.
Sure, and I would agree with that. I would say that at CHANA we begin these conversations in 6th grade and middle schools
Good.
for that exact reason.
Good.
It's really important
Right,
for us as
right.
well.
It really makes a lot of sense.
Certainly. Bill, we only have time for one more question this
Sure.
evening. And so the question is, if we walk away from this evening and can only recall one message, what is the most important thing that we should remember?
Yeah, that's tough that you only have, one thing you want me to tell you to remember. But to begin with, as I said earlier, this could happen to absolutely anybody, and it really can. And I've met a lot of people over the years who had it happen to them, and darn if they didn't feel the very same way that we did. I mean, they were just flat-footed. They didn't see it coming. Maybe they didn't like the guy, and then something happened, something tragic, or maybe not as tragic as ours, but that type of thing. So I would say to people, it can happen to you. It can happen to people you love, people close to you one way or another. Can happen to coworkers. Can happen to a neighbor. So what do you do about that? Start with learning the warning signs. Try to get up to speed. Read about this subject. Care about this subject. If it happens to 1 in 3 women, if it happens to 1 in 4 men, take a look around. The next time you're at the mall, the next time you're in some gathering, look around, look at all the women. It can happen to 1 in 3 women sometime in their lifetime, especially maybe the younger women, because it tends to happen between the 16 and 24. But that's, I think that would be my one main point I would make tonight. And just thank you so much for having me here. I appreciate that. And great questions, too. Thank you.
Bill, I want to thank you for your courage and your strength in sharing your family's story of the devastating loss of your beautiful daughter, Kristen. We know that you stood before us tonight, teaching us the lessons your family learned so that we can all do our part in preventing this type of tragedy in our community. We learned about the warning signs of abuse, and you have truly taught us that these signs must be taken seriously, because anyone can be a target of abusive behaviors. Tonight's conversation was a starting point. It was the beginning of a discussion that cannot end today, but that we must continue to engage in on a regular basis. At CHANA, we are committed to bringing this type of education to all of our community members. Unfortunately, in our work, we know that abuse knows no age limits. We work with individuals who have been victimized at a very young age, those who experience abuse in their elder years, and every year in between. Nobody is immune from abuse, and therefore we must all be educated about how abusive behaviors present themselves. Our work at CHANA is possible because of the strong support of a generous community. We would like to thank the Associated for its unyielding support during a most tumultuous time in our organization's history, with more crisis calls for help than ever before. I would like to thank CHANA's advisory board, led by Linda Katz. You are our champions, and your advocacy on behalf of our mission and our clients enable us to do this life-saving work. We would also like to extend our deepest gratitude to our sponsors and each and every donor who has supported this event this evening. All proceeds from tonight's event will help fund our newly expanded prevention education program. This evening's lead sponsor, Lou Hyman, knows just how important education and awareness are in the prevention of abuse, as his beloved late wife, Barbie Hyman, was CHANA's longtime prevention educator. Barbie had a special way of connecting with youth and helping them to recognize that while this topic may be uncomfortable, it must be addressed. In fact, at Barbie's funeral, a young woman approached the staff of CHANA and expressed that Barbie saved her life. That had Barbie not taught her how to identify the unhealthy and even dangerous patterns she was experiencing in her relationship, she may have suffered greater harm than she already had. Thank you, Lou, and all of our donors for enabling us to provide these life-saving conversations and ensuring that Barbie Hyman's legacy continues. I am thrilled to announce that for the first time in CHANA's history, we now have a team of dedicated staff members whose primary focus is to conduct prevention programs in our schools, youth groups, senior centers, and synagogues. CHANA is here for our community, and we invite you to reach out to us to facilitate an educational workshop for your organization or group. Thank you for joining us for this difficult but important conversation. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and please stay well and stay safe.